Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for being here with us. We're excited to have a couple of amazing educators across the Kansas City metro area joining us today. We're going to be talking about ideas of transitioning back into school. Many districts in the KC metro area have been all virtual, and now we're slowly transitioning back in the next 2 or 3 months. So we thought this would be a timely, collaborative conversation. So if I could go ahead, we'll start with Sue. Introduce yourself and tell us what district you're from.
Hi, I'm Sue Herrera, and I'm from Hickman Mills. I am the principal at Truman Elementary School.
Thank you. Kelly?
And I'm Kelly Nash. I'm the principal of Butcher Green Elementary in the Grandview School District.
Krishana?
Hi, I'm Krishana Robinson, and I am instructional coach from Hogan Preparatory Middle School.
Val?
I'm Valerie Montgomery, and I'm the coordinator of assessment, data, and integrated technology at Hogan Prep.
Awesome. So we have some great representation from schools around. Now, Hickman and Hogan Prep, you have been fully virtual, correct, up until this point. And what is your anticipated date back that you're wanting to get teachers and students back?
At Hogan, teachers are going to report back March 22nd, and our students will come back on April the 5th.
Okay. What about Hickman?
In Hickman Mills, teachers in K through 2 will enter the building next week, March 8th. They'll have the week in the building to prepare and teach from their classrooms. And then the week of March 15th, we're going to have K through 2 students come back, along with 3 through 5 teachers. And then March 22nd, we'll have our 3 through 5 students join in a hybrid schedule.
Awesome. And Grandview, you're on a bit of a different journey. Can you speak to when you transition K through 2 and what your goals are in the next couple of weeks?
We started the year fully virtual and started planning to have K2 back on a hybrid schedule about mid-September. And I think it was late September, early October when we were able to bring K through 2 back on an AB hybrid. We have Wednesday, that's a deep cleaning, planning, professional development day. In, I believe it was November, we were able to bring our 3rd, 4th, and 5th back on a hybrid. Not too long after that, we were able to bring K through 2 back 4 days a week, and that's where we have maintained at the elementary level. We've got our middle schools back on an AB hybrid right now. High school, we've brought back, I think, about 300 kids of the most at risk, with the goal of beginning to bring more of those back as more staff has been vaccinated.
Awesome. So this is great. We can see just the different journey that all of your districts have gone on. So you can learn from each other's successes and maybe some things that you wish you would have thought about as we transition back. So we're just going to do 2 rounds on today's call. Again, we're not expecting to know any answers, but we're just doing a collaborative call so that hopefully it brings ideas to us or the viewers who might watch this at a later time. In round 1, I would love for all of you to share what is one of your best ideas that you feel like it's working, or you think it's going to work, or you maybe, Kelly, in your case, it has worked, especially in regards to some of the most daunting issues people are considering, such as communication, buses, schedules. But if you could just share one thing with the group that you think has been a really good success that you would recommend.
Are you saying that for me, Shauna?
Whoever, you know what, I promised I wouldn't make you go first, so it's whoever would like to share.
You know what, I'll be brave. I'll use
I love it. I love it.
When I go back and think about where we were in September with so much fear among staff about what's going to happen, and they were envisioning the worst, I think probably one of the best things that we did as a district and collaboratively as leaders is coming together to develop a pretty in-depth plan that had similarities across the buildings, but unique to each building, where we were very clear about health protocols, about how we were going to handle movements in the hallways, how we were going to handle meals, expectations with visitors, and we had that in writing so that staff could, they had that, it was something very tangible for them, but it gave them something of an anticipatory set early of what the days were going to look like. And I think what it meant for staff is that they were able to come in and be more emotionally ready to handle the kids, because it was very clear on how we were going to do things. And it wasn't a terribly popular decision as the building principal, but I elected to, we weren't going to use the cafeteria, that our breakfasts and lunches are in the classrooms, and I have my teachers supervising those. And that was deliberate, because at that time we still had very high transmission rates across Jackson County. There were still so many unknowns, and having the kids have so many crossing opportunities and mixing groups, because we were working very hard to keep groups separate. And so we put together some protocols for students to lunch with their teachers, and then provide coverage for the teachers to have a duty-free lunch later. And I think what it did is it established a sense of physical safety so that the teachers could be there emotionally and cognitively for the kids.
Great suggestion. Sue, do you have one you'd like to share?
Well, of course. I actually have one that's pretty technical, and then one that's more like thinking and believing quadrant. But the technical one, and we're not in yet. I haven't welcomed anybody back yet for real. But one of the technical solutions we've come up with is we still want to be BIST. We still want to use BIST, and we still want to be able to be trauma sensitive and use that lens. And so we've been trying to brainstorm. We're not going to use, buddy rooms or anything else like that, but how can we still support kids if they're struggling, or if they have trauma, or if we say they're in their back seat. And so we got those old library carts, that people used to push around, and we've transformed them into BIST on a cart, or trauma sensitive on a cart. And my social worker and my counselor, they're going to wheel them around like the welcome committee, and they'll just, whenever a teacher needs assistance, or a student, more importantly, needs assistance, we will pull that child out into the hallway, and we'll be able to provide in the moment safe triage where, you can't be sending kids all over the building and mixing kids up. So that was one technical solution we came up with. And I totally stole this next one. It was good. I participated in service, but they did it with a paper clip, but you can do it with a rubber band. And you say to your staff, hey, here's this object that we know what the use is. What are other uses for it? And they're really irritated because they don't want to think that way for a while. Like, okay, come on, I want to get back to planning. But then they get into it and they think of all kinds of funny things, and we're laughing by the end of it. And then you say, that type of thinking that you just used to brainstorm how to use this object differently is the same thing you've been doing for a year in COVID. You've had to learn to teach differently. So what have you done differently that we don't want to lose once we come back in the building? And their answers were like amazing. Things like, I'm a better communicator in the moment with parents. I do less scaffolding. I release the information sooner to students. I have an eagle eye. I'm always watching in the Zoom to see who's learning and who's not. And I don't want to lose that sort of attention to detail when we go back in person. And I just did that this morning, so it was fresh in my mind. So those are my two things.
I love that. And I think especially, you hit two components, the social emotional learning and that creative way, because kids are going to be having trauma. And that's one of the biggest things we need to be thinking about for them. So I love that creative idea. And then this thinking outside the box of a culture climate builder for staff, of you have been doing it and helping them honor and bring those great practices in. Awesome. Krishana or Val, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, it's interesting to hear the perspectives of building principals, because that's not my perspective. Like I mentioned, I'm the data assessment and tech. So I don't know that I have a lot of best ideas right now, but I do think what we came up with, our assessment schedule for MAP, I think it helped us a lot. And Krishana, you were in on that conversation. It was helpful to kind of get a skeleton lined out of how this will work. And I think it just kind of, like you mentioned, making sure everyone was emotionally safe and like having some of the known things ready. So I think the schedule that we made, and basically what we did was we tried to figure out how can we, without over assessing, how can we get all of our sessions into a few weeks, but also allow our teachers time to build relationships with kids that they've literally, some have never met before. And just trying to balance our time with kids with, you know, assessment, social emotional learning, everything we have to get done in just 8 weeks.
Krishana, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, like Val, I don't have the lens of a administrator because I'm coming from one aspect in just middle school, and how we're preparing for our students and our teachers to come back is going to look a little different. And so Hogan is a smaller district, so you know we have the elementary, we have the middle school, and have the high school. So a lot of that is going to be building related on how it's going to be orchestrated and how it's going to come back. Our staff is just now being notified, like several several other districts are just telling their staff. So preparing our teachers with, we've done asynchronous the whole school year. So we have done some Zoom live, but you know, at this point, just getting the teachers prepared, getting the families notified, finding out who would like their students to continue in person, continue remote, and who wants to come back in person. So the logistics part is what we are really focusing on right now. The social emotional support of the teachers as far as getting them vaccinated, and making sure that Hogan has something set up and lined up for our teachers. And then the logistics of bringing in, and how will that look, and what's going to be best, you know, cleaning schedules and things like that, where the other two districts already had that in place. This is what we're now putting in place. So that's where we kind of had different lenses on that. So I can only speak to basically the middle school as far as what we're, you know, doing to approach that.
Awesome, thank you. Well, some of the biggest commonalities I heard in your best practice would be, one, to make sure that you're considering the social emotional learning of teachers and students. And then my takeaway from Kelly and Val and some of the things we're referring to, and we know this with students, that routine and protocols and knowing what to expect are big for everyone, right? It helps provide a sense of security. So the more that you can front load, whether it be health and safety protocols, Kelly, you mentioned having that written down and having it in real clarity and thinking that through could really provide a sense of security for people. And Val, to your point, even having the assessment schedule. Hickman and Hogan, you're coming right back in and, hi, we've got a couple weeks and now we're going to do the state test with you. So having that assessment schedule lined out will probably bring some security for people, because we like to do what is known. But to Sue's point, we also need to help staff capitalize on, like, that paperclip activity. You have been thinking outside the box the whole time. So how can we continue to kind of honor that flexible thinking too? We'll continue to use big practice or best practice. So we're going to close with, what are some of the biggest questions or obstacles that you would still like ideas or clarity from? We may not get the answers at the end of this call. It might be a follow-up call, or we could hopefully maybe even get some follow-up posts and threads from others. But what would be one of the biggest questions that you have that you would like ideas from? And so what we're going to do is we'll go in the order of Sue, Kelly, Krishana, then Val. We'll let you ask what your biggest question or topic you would like to brainstorm about. And then we'll pause for a moment to think about those questions. And then we'll just have open airtime if anyone would like to respond with some feedback or an idea. And if we're all still stumped and don't know, then we'll just end the call and then hopefully do some follow-up. All right, so let's go through round two with questions or something you would like more ideas on. Sue.
Well, I will say Hickman Mills has done a great job of providing us a return to learn plan that everything's scripted out, but I still worry about these hybrid days when my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are at home. Making sure that it's really worthwhile, that it's really time well spent, because we're going from 4.5 days of live Zoom instruction to, it feels like 2.5 days, 2 in person and then a half day Zoom on Wednesdays. So we're struggling, even though we've got lots of direction from the district, just trying to make sure it's as purposeful as possible for our older students at the elementary.
I love that. And that's probably a teacher planning issue too, right? How do I maintain in person, and now I also have this hybrid schedule? So how do we support them in that? It's a great question. Kelly, what's yours?
Well, I'm starting to think about next year and when we receive them all back, in whatever state that we get them back in. And I see, because we've had our kids physically for most of the year in some fashion. And so it's given us a pretty good idea of who has been engaged virtually, who's been engaged hybrid, and there's a pretty clean dividing line. The ones who've been engaged, they are right where they should be, and they are running like they're going to be ready for next year. And then we've got a group of kids that either attendance has been an issue, engagement has been an issue. They're not going to be ready. And I'm kind of going back and forth with the idea of, do I prioritize a class in each grade level for the kids that were very disengaged to put a lot of support in, so that we don't hold back these kids that are ready to fly? What are the pros and cons of doing something like that? Because it's very clear, the ones who've been highly engaged in their education this year and those who have not. And so I'm kind of curious what others are, how they're grappling with that too.
Right. And that's what I've heard from every district that is virtual. You have this group of kids who is either turning everything in and attending Zoom calls, or it's a big divide. So I think that's a great question of how do we scaffold and support, and what structures are we using to help with those learning gaps? Krishana?
Well, Kelly, that was a great point, because I was thinking the same things. That's one of the biggest struggles. What do we do with those students that have not been engaged this whole time? And then you have those that have been. So, but I'm gonna stretch a little bit further and look at the asynchronous learning to being transitioned to now in-person learning. How do the teachers have a balance? Because they have to prepare classes for in-person, and they have to still provide the asynchronous lesson for those that are not going to come back. So how do we keep the equity in between the lessons? You're going to add more to it because they're in person. You have a longer stretch of time that you are in front of students. And then you have that of those that is going to be looking at the lesson asynchronously. And then what about the balance with the teachers, with the support? What happens to the emails that come from those students or those parents that are being taught asynchronously, along with those that you have in your classroom? So really, how do we support and make sure the teachers are not being pulled one way or the other, that we're giving them enough planning time? Because if they're in the classroom for a traditional day and they only get one planning time, and yes, we have a day off that they're going to use for cleaning, but is that really enough time to plan for two asynchronous lessons in the middle school, and also to have 2 lessons for in-person? So how do we find that balance for teachers?
Yeah, and how do we help support them in that? Because I think what I heard in the best practices, it really helps when you have a framework or an idea before it becomes a problem. So I love the thinking of how could we be prepared for that before they realize that it's going to be a problem. Can we have a framework we could propose? And Val, what's a looming question you have?
Well, I think these are all really great questions, and I think we're kind of driving at the same thing, which is, so this is kind of what Krishana and Sue had asked, but knowing that we have 8 weeks at Hogan, that's our timeline, how do we leverage this time? What is highest priority? How do we structure, and what guidance do we give a teacher and like Krishana said, how do we balance? Now you're used to having your kids asynchronous, well, not all asynchronous, but you're used to having them all virtual. And now you've got kids in person for 2 days that are getting all your attention. What happens to those kids who are asynchronous now? And just imagining, like, on Monday and Tuesday, I have this group, and then I have to repeat what I did with them with my B group. Now what is my A group doing? And just trying to figure out, what structure can we provide teachers with so that they have, a roadmap. And then also it's only 8 weeks. So, like, what's the best use of time here?
Right. So very deep questions. Do we have any responses from anybody in the group with ideas that you have tried, or maybe ideas that are just coming to mind as we hear each other?
I will say, when, as Krishana and Valerie were talking about that tension of the groups and the AB groups, and you've got half your kids here Monday, Tuesday, the rest are at home. We've been grappling with that for months now, and it's been a bit easier in the younger grades with a little bit more parent involvement to help them. Back when we had that as an issue, we've really struggled with the older kids, keeping them engaged on their asynchronous days. Like, when they're here in person, it's fantastic. Like, it's a dream world of no discipline, of happy kids, happy teachers. But the struggle is knowing the other half are at home and keeping them engaged. And we really had to grapple with what work is essential for kids, what forms of assessment are essential. Can we assess mastery in ways that are different than paper and pencil, both asynchronously and in person? So it's caused us to challenge our practice really hard, because the kids have exerted their will in this. Like, in the beginning, they stuck to Canvas and Seesaw and things like that and used the tools asynchronously. But as time has gone by and that novelty is gone, it's been more of a struggle. So now we're having to look at ourselves as educators and challenge some of the things that we've done, let go some of our traditional models and expectations, and start looking at what can we do to keep them engaged, and what ways can we assess what they really know that isn't as traditional as what we would like or what we have been used to.
When you have students, a group that is in person and then the other half that is at home, are your teachers still trying to do synchronous lessons with them, or it's just asynchronous for those 2 days that so they're still having to make the asynchronous and be prepared?
It's been hard for them to plan.
That's
very hard. And depending on the, kind of the developmental stage of the learner, if you're the kids on Thursday and Friday, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is hard on you. And it's almost like we're living a brand new school year every single week. Like, every week it's new. And some kids, they can pick it up just like that. Others, it's the Monday, Tuesday kids have an easier time than the Thursday, Friday. And for the teachers planning, it's really hard, like trying to introduce a new concept. And so for the B group, you're introducing it on Thursday and Friday and reinforcing it on Monday and Tuesday, and it's flipped with the other group. And it's as difficult for the encore teachers, any of the specials encore. It's a challenge.
Are your teachers planning, remind me, you're elementary level, right? I'm just thinking out loud, but are your teachers, like, are they planning as a grade level then? Is there any advantage to having, like 3 first grade teachers, or maybe someone focuses on the A group and the B group?
They have gotten, it definitely has helped strengthen collaboration, because, before we kind of played at collaboration, and now it has been an essential, because they could not survive without, and they have had to kind of divide and conquer, because we pulled back in the expectations of guided reading, of the components of balanced literacy. We were a Eureka Math district, and they had to figure out how to make those components work in a compacted amount of time. And so, yeah, they leverage the power of collaboration, and I've tried to do my very best to ensure that I protect it at all costs, so that we're not cherry picking off their planning times. And on Wednesday, we've tried to really use Wednesday as that's our PD, BLT, any of our committee meetings, but also giving them some additional protected plan time that day, because planning is so much harder this year. It's probably their number one stressor. Above the instructing, above the grades, anything. It's the planning load, and the execution of it with the tools has just about broken them in a lot of ways.
So I definitely hear, though, through your discussion about the difficulty, one of the things that would be helpful, and Val, you brought this up, might be even going back to the concept of possibly departmentalizing or dividing and conquering, which is the antithesis of what we want to sometimes do with PLC. But in this type of situation, it might be a benefit for those of you who are just going in, to help teachers think about, if you have the luxury. Middle school at Hogan does not, if they're the only one teaching that course. But if you had a grade level, hey, maybe you do the math asynchronous, I do the ELA asynchronous, and some dividing and conquering might be a helpful planning approach, since we know planning is going to be a huge issue. Sue, it looks like, I think you had unmuted, and I might have talked over you.
No, I mean, it's not profound. All I can say is that when we've been brainstorming, and the same things Kelly just outlined are the same conversations we have. Are we front loading, or are we practicing what we've already taught? And the only things we came up with today, as a matter of fact, was they're just going to embrace flip videos. They're just going to embrace, okay, I got to send this snippet of a video of me repeating what I just taught you, so that you can watch it in the moment when you're at home trying to practice. And so we foresee chunking the day intentionally for our students at home, anchored in a short video from the teacher. And then teachers are committing to checking in on those kids as often as they can. And we know it's going to be a lot, but having waited, it'll be a full year, March 13th, since the buses have rolled up. We're ready. We're like, okay, whatever it takes at this point, we're just going to do it. They're afraid of all the, the same things you said, Kelly, that I really relate to what you're saying, from the feelings that teachers had at the beginning of the year about being scared. We're facing some of that right now, but as the vaccines become available, we're starting to ease into the idea of being in the building. But all good ideas. Valerie, I'd love to hear what you had to say about how you came up with your MAP schedule, because ours is due in a couple of weeks, and I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do that.
Same.
I'm like, what? I don't know.
Well, that is a perfect segue. And I don't know what people within the group feel comfortable with, but one of the goals for having this call today, and the network in general, is I'm trying to provide a hub where, just like this conversation, if you're in a district, sometimes we do our best, we're siloed and we don't get great ideas, and we're all at different places in the journey. So I definitely want to encourage people. You are more than happy. I can set you up with each other's emails as well. But I would love to, after this call, if even on the poster chat, if you had documents or schedules or things that you would be helpful to others, to please post them there, because I would like us to create a safe culture where we could start sharing some of those ideas and quit recreating the wheel and help each other out. So for the purpose of this call, I'm going to close and stop recording, but I'd like to thank anyone if they did watch, and please to post any of your comments or resources you might have for the group.